Cambodia is one of the most heavily mined locations on the planet. Clean water wells, medical facilities, and schools are often accessible only by a small footpath leading directly through a live landmine field. Deviation from these paths can lead to maiming or death. If not for advocates like Freedom Fields USA and the hands-on work of demining groups like the Halo Trust, the remains of war will continue to lie inches below the fertile soil, indiscriminately waiting to attack. A snowy runway in Kosovo, still pockmarked by war, accepted us onto its frozen tarmac. Littering the country, unexploded cluster bombs still threaten the citizens daily. The Halo Trust was in a desperate battle with the elements, and with international governing voices, declared this deadly refuge of war before another child's life was tragically cut short. With Cindy McCain at our side, we were on a mission to reveal these truths. The hidden village of Kekchi Indians, deep in the jungles of Guatemala and accessible only by a small boat, was desperate for dental care. International health emissaries invited us to help reach these people, spotlighting a frightening reality. When you can't eat due to decaying teeth, you suffer a slow death of malnutrition. The dentists of IHE saved them. Facial deformities and cleft palates afflict millions annually across the globe. But in rural areas of India, steeped in mythological lore, these abnormalities can be deemed a curse by the gods, bringing shame to a family and leaving children locked away for life. Operation Smile chose Guwahati, India, a place seldom visited by international medical teams, to be a hub for free facial surgeries, giving thousands of men, women, and children new lives and new smiles. All right, and with that introduction, here we are. We are live with Kevin Ball. And what you heard me reading was actually the back cover of his novel, Heart of a Stuntman. So, Kevin, hearing those words, tell me what you're thinking right now. Tell me how you're feeling.
I've never heard anybody else read my words. And honest to God, Josh, this is the first time that I have heard that. You know, I've read them out loud in my own room and to myself, but to hear somebody else read them, it's both scary and just amazing. So thank you. Thank you for putting that piece together.
You know, it's awesome because when I first heard you were going to be at Chiller and I started looking into who you were a little bit, and I saw your book, I was so gung-ho about he has to have this with him. I talked to SIGSCOM, please make him bring this book. I messaged you, when you knew you were going to start doing conventions, did you think that your book was going to be something that you needed to have on your table, or were you more focused on the Jeepers Creepers and the stuntman side of things?
Honestly, no, I was actually focused on the book. I told Robert that one of my stipulations was that I wanted to be able to bring the book or copies of it out and put it on the table, even if, I wasn't planning on selling them necessarily. And at the one we were at, I ended up giving more books away than I did. I think I sold 2 of them, but I gave the rest of them away. But that was one of my things. I wanted to use, it's a lot more difficult than maybe a lot of people realize when you, even with a publisher, once you get a book out, the old days of everything are kind of gone, and it's tough to get them into the brick and mortar stores, and to be able to use the cons as an outlet to be able to talk to people about what I do on both sides was something that attracted me to it. And it worked. It really did.
That's awesome. Now, some background here. So we have 14 people in the chat so far. I don't want this to just be me throwing questions at Kevin. It's a conversation with Kevin Ball. We're here to talk about what he's done, talk about his experience with the different organizations he's volunteered with. So I want to say hello to everybody who's here so far. I see some familiar faces. Papa Goss, how you doing, buddy? Uncle Ed. Kevin, you know Uncle Ed. He was with us at Chiller that weekend. I see Dave, CSR Collectibles. There's a lot of great people that are in the chat. Now, we will do our best to acknowledge the chat as we go. We will do our best to answer any questions that come through the chat as we go. But keep in mind, we're going to be conversing here. So don't feel ignored. If you have questions, please drop them in there, and we will do our best to answer them as we go.
I have one of my good friends that just posted something that just messaged me. I guess he's on there, and he says, "Good Lord, you're an amazing specimen." Thank you, Buck. Dr. Ball, it's an honor, sir. Okay, so John Buck is a good friend of mine, one of my best friends that I worked at WWE with, and he is like an amazing. He's a graphic artist, but he's a manipulator of all things visual, and he's the one that puts all the stuff up on the screens for us when we're doing the show. So anytime you see our wrestlers run in, he's the one that's designed and put everything up. But he works like where it would take you and I like days and hours to do it, he does it in seconds. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are people in this world that like John that are blow my mind. Anyway.
So Kevin, for those who might not be familiar with your work, we'll kind of start with the stuntman side of things to give them some background. Tell me a little bit about how you got into doing the stunts, some of the different things you've acted on or worked on before, and just set the stage for us.
All right. I was born in 1970, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And if these were the days of Evel Knievel, and it was all the TV shows that we used to watch. Chips, The Fall Guy, $6 Million Man, everything. There was very little, storyline. It was all just stunts and people, driving cars fast, falling off of cars, falling off of buildings. And I just had there was just a natural tendency to lead me towards that direction. Growing up, I did, gymnastics, I did martial arts, I drove motorcycles. So everything I did just kind of led me in that direction. And I really, being in Orlando versus being like in New York or California, I really, really chased it down. It was hard. And I located a couple stunt coordinators. I got lucky enough when I started getting into it is when the studios were built here, both MGM Studios and Universal. So I got in contact, when they first were built, we started actually doing, we did Sequest, we did Swamp Thing. We did a lot of, there were movies that happened. So I kind of jumped into it in the right time. And then most of my connections were through Miami, which was like the big place that everybody went to film. So I got my stunt coordinator buddies, and I just started working for them, mostly in Miami, and then branched out throughout the United States.
Awesome. So it was really just doing it yourself. Like there wasn't LinkedIn to put a profile out there and have people find you. It was really like hitting the ground running and finding that work.
Oh yeah, no. It was, we had trades that we would get from a couple different organizations, like out of California, out of New York, out of Miami. The Stunt Players Directory was one. And basically it would list all the shows that were either in production, pre-production, or development. And that's when we had, everybody, you had your paper headshots, you would put your resume together. And my mom says she remembers me like weekly sending out 20 to 30, mailing out 20 to 30, if not more, headshots and resumes to these productions all around the United States and the world trying to get jobs. And that's what you had to do back then. You had to physically mail stuff out or go hustle the sets.
Yeah. Stamps, ladies and gentlemen. You had to put a little stamp on the corner of an envelope and put it in the mail. Spooky Hollows wants to know what your favorite movie that you've worked on is.
I mean, I have to go back to Jeepers Creepers, just because, it was more of a family movie. My buddy that was a stunt coordinator, I had helped him move out to California about a year earlier. And he called me and said, "Hey, I have this really low budget horror movie that's going on in Tavares, Florida. It's not far from my parents' house. We can go stay there if you want to work on it." And I was like, "Sure." So Jeepers has always been held like close to my heart. But I think my favorite that I've actually ever done was Game Night.
Really?
Yeah, I started doubling Kyle Chandler on Bloodline in the Keys, the Netflix show. We went and did Game Night, and we went after that we did Godzilla King of Monsters and others. And there was something about it. It was like one of the first like hardcore comedy movies that I got to work on. And the fight scene, doing slapstick comedy fight scenes, I mean, it just reminds me of, Buster Keaton and the old days. And it was just, I mean, hours and hours and hours of pounding the ground, but it was
Mhm.
laughing and laughing and laughing. And anytime you bring humor into that stunt world, it just makes it better.
It's funny, when I was reading your book, you talked a little bit about working on Sex Drive. And there was a passage from the book that I was reading, and I was talking to my wife about, oh, he was in Sex Drive. Have you seen that movie? And she lost her mind. Loves that movie. It was
Really?
She loves that movie. I haven't seen it in ages. I remember it being like one of the better comedies of that time.
It was fun.
So when no, go ahead.
No, say well, like my one of my good friends was the guy that was chained to the bedpost, running naked through the cornfield. He's actually the one that hit me with the truck. So yeah, that was a funny movie. That was really good.
It was. It's definitely a good one. If you haven't seen it, you got to put it on your list. It's a good one. It's held up. When it came time to do a convention, how did you get involved with SIGSCOM? How did you get out to New Jersey? Like, was it something that you've dreamed of doing for years, or like a new opportunity that you decided to check out?
Absolutely new opportunity. I was contacted first by they're going to kill me because I can't remember everybody's name, but a couple of guys who was with us. You know, you were there. Who was with us through SIGSCOM other than Robert? There was
Schwid.
Okay, so him and his partner had contacted me, and they tracked me down, and they said, "Look, we're trying to pull people in that are like not just the actors, but have been stunt doubles." And they brought me out to do a couple signings to do, Jeepers memorabilia. Along with it, there was stuff that we signed that had Breck on it, that had Victor Salva, that had Jonathan, that had Gina, myself. So it was, they were like, we were trying to get all the stunt doubles and everything else too. So that was just kind of like the first, they asked me if I wanted to come out, and I was like, sure, this will be fun. Did 2 of those, and they kept mentioning, Robert and conventions, and I'm like, okay, let me, if anybody calls me. And then randomly one day I got a call from Robert about, wanting to get me in with SIGSCOM to do conventions. And I was like, why not? It's kind of like my entire life has been, when the door opens, you just kind of walk through and see what's there. And I was like, cool, this will be fun. And again, Chiller was my first one. And I can honestly say that I am like an energy vampire. I absorb everything that I get from everybody. But then the thing is, I spit all that back out to the next person. And I have not, all of us talked about it, I have not felt so much admiration and love by a bunch of strangers in my entire life. I mean, there were people coming up with posters from like Wild Things and other shows that I had done. And they're like, yeah, we follow your career. And I'm like, I'm just a stunt guy. I don't know what you're following. And so, that was amazing. I hope to do a whole bunch more. I can't wait.
it was really rad seeing down the row. We had Esty Nemeth, we had you, we had Matthew Cordair, Alan Robinson, and Lynn McCree. And it was, Matthew had done one convention previously, but it was just for a day. So
yeah,
I think it's safe to say it was everyone's first full weekend convention.
Yeah.
And watching you all adapt to it, like after the first day of like, how's this going to go? And just, it was amazing. And seeing your line did not die the entire weekend. You were kept busy. It was so rad with the different pieces. There was a couple cosplayers that came through. And I think the coolest thing was hearing you all talk about it afterwards at the end of the day. Like looking back on your day of the experience, it was genuine. It was heartwarming. It was I guess you just tell us how you felt. Like at the end of the day, when you were done with the convention.
Oh, and like Matthew was our baby, because if you look at the amount of if you look at myself and Alan and put us together, like a lot of actors and actresses will have like an entire career that'll span, and they might have 10 or 12 movies in their entire career as actors and actresses, which is amazing because they're the leads in it's big things. Stunt people sometimes have a lot more. And I mean, with Alan and I, you put us together, there's 300 plus credits.
Yeah.
And then Matthew was kind of like, the Canadian baby. and then Lynn, oh my God, she was just, the embodiment of love. She was so fantastic. And that's what we all talked about afterwards. All of us, we would go down to the bar, we'd sit there, and we all had that same thing. And Lynn was just like, she goes, uncommitted love is like all I feel with everybody that's here. And it was special. I mean, it's addictive. I want to go and do more, not for any type of monetary thing, but just to sit there and be able to talk to people. I mean, that was the best part.
Well, everybody watching this, if you want to see Kevin at the convention that's around you, let SigsCom know.
Yeah,
and more
please.
importantly, drop comments on the posts that those conventions are making. You want Kevin Ball there. You want him to be that convention. Tag him, tag SigsCom, and just put the word out. That's the best way to get these individuals out to those conventions. Now, one of the nights that we were talking, you and I were having a conversation, Chuck, over For Horror's Sake. We were sitting there, and Lynn was not happy with our conversation because we were going down this very serious path. So everybody watching this is your warning that we're going to go into some topics that aren't upbeat and fun. And I want to start jumping into that now because
absolutely,
this is really what we're here to talk about, is what's inside of this book. And there is a link in the description to the website, harveststuntman.com. It'll tell you how you can find the book, and you need to read it. It's amazing. So a couple things that really jumped out after reading this. One of them was your use of karma and your use of Karma 180. Tell us about Karma 180, because I loved what you said about that. I loved how you came up with that.
I was working on like trying to figure out different names for our production company. And this one, I mean, it came pretty fast. I've always been a big believer in karma, outside of any religious aspects or anything. I mean, yeah, there just seems to be an energy in the universe that sometimes, you give something away because you give it away. And then sometimes things come back on the other side. But I named it Karma 180 because the whole purpose is, if you look at something that's 180 degrees from where you're at, it's the polar opposite. It's the opposite direction. If you're standing in your driveway and you're looking at the street and you look 180 degrees from where you're at, it's at the street. So I went, okay. A lot of people were like, well, why didn't you do a Karma 360? Because karma comes back to you. And I was like, well, if you do something to try to get something to come back to you, then it's kind of not the whole meaning of karma. So instead of doing Karma 360, which was where people were like, yeah, that means that's karma. You would do something, you get something back. I'm like, no. You give it away. You give it away 180 degrees, whatever it is. You don't ask for anything in return.
Right.
And if something comes back to you, it comes back to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Don't look for it. It's the art of giving.
When did karma really come into your life? Like, when was that a word that you really felt?
God, my dad was Southern Baptist. My mom was Catholic turned Presbyterian. I was like kind of pushed into alternate, these little religious-y things. Anytime I would mention, anything outside of that, they kind of like frowned on it. Like a lot of young kids, got into martial arts, and then martial arts led you into these Asian things, and that led to like Zen and all the rest of the stuff. And I guess at a young age, I just kind of like started reading these different documents from other, ethnic like cultures on spirituality. And in almost all of the like spiritual text, something deals with, a karmic activity of, this is what you're supposed to do. You give everything away. You help other people. And, you, by helping other people, things are returned to you. You can't do it expecting things to come back. You just do it. And then if you're in the, if it's in the right position, the right time, sometimes things come back. And I'm an example of that. Every time everything I've done is just trying to give away, not to return. And like most of my friends, a lot of my friends out at Universal I worked with, they would have to drag information out of myself and John about what we were doing. Cause they're like, well, you don't post things. You don't come back. You don't brag about stuff. And I'm like, why? They're like, well, yeah, but that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, why? We don't do it to brag about it. We do stuff because it's the right thing to do. And then, the universe, when I say the universe, I've been with a lot of different Christian organizations and stuff too, and helping out. And I use the word universe versus like, any organized religion. I talk to, what I feel is a God. I talk to, with the universe, whether it's real or not. It just, it's that comfort zone. But when you put things out to the universe and you just give, good stuff does come back. It just happens.
And I think, you and I have talked about social media. We've talked about kind of our views on social media. It's interesting to hear that, why don't you post anything, or why don't you post about these things? Because I think most people nowadays, they want those likes. They want those, like, the views for those different things they've done. When you started volunteering, what was different about social media then versus now?
When I first started volunteering, there was barely any social media. I mean, there was MySpace. Facebook had just started kicking in. Instagram was new. YouTube was around, and John and I used that to like push the material that we filmed, but it wasn't for promotional material necessarily. It wasn't trying to get like likes and stuff. It was just, that was the area that we could get our stuff out on.
And I think I already know the answer to this, but if Instagram and Facebook and everything would have been as popular as they are now, when you first started, do you think that would have changed with sharing things and making those posts?
I mean, it might have. I mean, if I was out in the jungles of Guatemala or somewhere and I could do like a live video feedback of what we were doing with this group, and I could link it to their website, it might have been, it might have been a little bit different.
And that's a good, I didn't think about it from the documentarian side of things. Like, you were doing a lot of documentary work and like taking the videos. So that would be a different spin on it as to why you would share it. So I didn't think of it from that perspective. That's a good call.
From a braggadocious side, no, it wouldn't have changed. There's
braggadocious. I like that.
Yeah, big words. That wouldn't have changed. It was, we've never been, and I think, I don't know, I sent the link to John, so he's probably listening too. I don't know if he's going to chime in. But we just never were out for the notoriety. There was one time when we came back from one of the trips, and we tried doing like a YouTube site, and we were trying to get notoriety, and it hits you every now and then. You're like, maybe there's something here, maybe we can do something. And we realized that we could put videos of these like amazing things, from landmines to cleft palate surgeries or whatever. We could put these videos out, and we would get 4 or 5 likes. Meanwhile, the guy that's playing baseball in the front yard with his kid and gets hit in the nuts, all of a sudden, boom, 100,000. It's so, social media is not really, social media and humanity, as far as like marketing, they don't really go hand in hand at all.
And in the chat, John's here. So, hey, John, I'm so stoked you're here. He said,
I got to put the glasses on to actually see. I'm getting old, John. Uploading videos from Mount Smile, Kenya was hard.
I believe it. And of all the organizations that you worked with, Operation Smile seems like that would be the real like tearjerker. That would be the one that would really be hard from an emotional perspective. In your opinion, which one was the hardest one? What did you go home with like the most weight from?
Wow. I don't think John and I ever went home with any like emotional weight with these organizations, because, even though you were seeing positivity and negativity in the same mission, it was the overall like end game was positive. It was really hard watching, these kids, with cleft palates come in, but you knew that they were being taken care of. I think John could probably also admit to this. I think that the toughest one was when we went out with Cindy on this to Asia when her husband was running for president, and we ended up in some locations around there where there was, I mean, poverty was beyond belief. And the first time we actually saw a child pass out, hit the ground because of starvation was like that sucks you in the gut worse than anything you could ever imagine. I mean, we were walking through a schoolyard and there was a child. We walked past a group of kids and this one kid passed out. And I looked over at our guide, which was next to Cindy, and I said, heat exhaustion. And he goes, no, starvation. And I was like, dude, I still tear up. I'm like, this kid that's living in the same plane of existence as myself, John, the whole group, just fell to the ground because there wasn't enough nutrients in his system to actually, sustain the ability to walk. And that, that can be tough when you see, I guess the weird thing is like anywhere in the world that we've been, no matter how bad it is, kids laugh, kids play, they have fun. It could be the most impoverished area in the world and people can be shooting guns around. And if you've got 5 kids in the street with like, a pine cone, they're going to kick it around and have fun. So the kids are kind of immune in a certain way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when you analyze the family values of it, when you analyze what actually is there, yeah, it gets tough.
Yeah. And when your first big event, your first travel exploration, and was in Cambodia, right? That was like the first one that you really got into. Tell us how that came to be. The book, the way that you talk about getting involved in it in the book is amazing because it sounds like something from a movie. Like it just, the pieces falling into place. So tell us.
Oh, it's real. It is exactly what it is. I was working with a couple groups in Orlando, just doing some humanitarian work because I was coming out of this horrible relationship with a girl. And I wanted to give something away and do something. And I don't know where I was, but someplace in my life, I saw this picture in a magazine of this guy in some country, young guy with a camera filming nature videos. And I was like, I can do that. I want to do something different. And I started researching online. And actually the website, the guy that created The Amazing Race, his website is the one that I found it on. And there was a website of like all these organizations around. And I found this one out of Conroe, California. And they were, it's called Freedom Fields USA. And they raised money for landmine removal. And I don't know, I just like went for it. So I put some stuff together, got in touch with them. I got an invite to come out and meet them. I flew out to California, out to Monterey, and met with the founder of that organization. Basically, it was a book club, a bunch of ladies that created they had their book club, and they decided they wanted to do something better with their life. So they took the book club and turned it into a group that raised money for landmine removal. After they read a book by Long Ung called First They Killed My Father, I believe was the name of it. And this is her history of growing up in the genocide in Cambodia. So the ladies basically started sending, getting money up and sending it to this other organization called the Halo Trust, based out of Scotland. And they would go over and actually do the landmine removal. So I just thought this would be a cool situation to maybe do a documentary, even though John and I had never done a documentary. We've been in and out of the business long enough. And I'm like, how hard can it be? So I've talked my way into a lot of stuff, just like, I've talked my way out of a lot of shit too. And I just talked us into it. I had an invite. I flew out there. I met with all the ladies from this book club. When I got out there, I realized that Clint Eastwood's wife at the time, Dana Eastwood, was one of the members of the group. And we had this amazing, I would send John pictures back from this thing of like, I'm holding like inert landmines in my hand that they were brought back over. And I'm like, this is this is that, this is this. And then, I'm sitting there drinking tequila with Dina Eastwood. And it just turned into this like amazing, just, I don't know, it's heartfelt event.
Yeah.
And that was the start. I mean, we all just like hit it off. And then they said, do you want to come with us to Cambodia? And I was like, sure. But I wasn't going to go on my own. Yeah, John, he talked me into it. And I know when I talked him into it, and it's in the book, we both worked at Universal. We were both doing this Fear Factor show. John he was like a manager. He got stuck into doing they have this like Halloween Horror Nights show every year at Universal. And John got pushed over into management. He didn't know what he was doing. He hated it. And then one day we were just driving around the park in these tractors, and and I kept inviting him. I'm like, look, I'm going to Cambodia. I want you to come with me. And finally, he's like, I'm going to go. I'm not having any fun here. I'm going to go with you. And that was like the beginning. And we ended up just like, he bought a ticket. I bought a ticket. Next thing you know, 5 months later, we're on a flight to Cambodia.
That's friendship right there. I've had friends who have asked me to go a block away, and I've told them no. I can't imagine picking up everything and going to Cambodia. Now, in the book, I believe it was the Cambodia flight that some of the book club members they got to the plane and they decided they couldn't do it. Is that right?
We had one member. There was I would say there may be 6 or 7 people coming with us. One of the ladies made it all the way to San Francisco airport and changed her mind and was like, I can't do it. Which, I mean, in everyday life, it's not that big a deal. But when you put everything together with what we've been through and what we try to keep, I hate to use the word preach, but we try to preach, that's your opportunity to move forward and to try something that you've never done. But it didn't work for her. So,
and I get it. I can imagine just the fears, and I mean, fear really being the biggest thing of holding you back of what am I getting myself into? So no disrespect to her.
No, it's a fear that
you made it that far.
I'm surprised John and I made it that far. I mean, we never done anything like that. It's just
And so for those watching, if you've caught on to this was kind of Kevin and John's first diving into being documentarians, right? That's fair to say?
Absolutely.
So when you get to Cambodia with all your equipment, how did that go?
Oh, that was great. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. There's a great picture, and I think I mentioned it in a book, but there's actually a real picture of we stayed when we made it to Carmel, California, which is where we stayed with the group before we went to San Francisco and then bounced our way down to Cambodia. There's a great picture of me like on a couch with a camera, and I'm like, I mean, John and I both had backgrounds in film and TV, and we knew what looked good as far as like shots. We knew, how to do different things, but I mean, we weren't like videographers by any sense of the word. We just took off. I mean, there were like 17 buttons on the camera. I think I used 2. I did the video. John grabbed the still shots. We always joke about the fact that with all of us, it's like there's a ton of video of John and there's a ton of photos of myself, but never do the 2 intermix. There's like no video of me and there's no photos of John. It's just like, we found a little spot and we just kind of like stuck in that realm and yeah.
One of the things that I had sent you when we talked about doing this was a little word association. So one of the things that I have on here is Cambodia. So nowadays, when you hear Cambodia, what are some of the things that come to mind?
Just looking at John, he had no idea how to operate the camera. True. Yeah. The funny thing is, John and I were just talking about this about 2 hours ago. I told him that I was going to be on the show, and we were, and he's like, what, if you're not happy with what you're doing, you need to get back out and do stuff. And I said, what would make me happy? Nothing would make me happier than being in a landmine field with some good fried chicken. And that was just like, that was one of my memories.
Yeah.
We made it from, flew into Siem Reap, Cambodia, and then managed to, make it through all the trips out to the Halo Trust headquarters, which was probably I don't even know the hourage. I mean, it was half a day drive in Land Rovers through these little ox cart trails. We got out there and they had this, because Cindy McCain was with us and the other ladies from Freedom Fields were with us. They had this fun little gathering, and they had some of the best fried chicken I've ever had in my entire life.
That's amazing.
And we were, in the middle of, bumfuck Cambodia, nowhere. And John and I still talk about that. It was.
And you had mentioned just like the scent of the streets in Cambodia.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's now when you get out to the farther out, like the farther out areas, it turned into, a little bit different, but in, especially in like Siem Reap and areas around there, every morning they would sweep the the leaves, the dust, everything out of the hotels out to the street, and they would like light it on fire and they would burn it. But it wasn't like what you would imagine in the US as like a trash fire. There was this beautiful, almost incense smell that came from the streets. And again, John can reiterate this. And I've only smelled it like there and a couple other places. And it was just this amazing, amazing feeling. They always say that like the olfactory sense is the one that brings you back to memories more than anything else. So if you smell something when you were a child, you smell it again when you're a little bit older, you're like, oh, that brings that memory back. So every time I hit something in that same realm, it takes me back to Cambodia.
And are there other kind of sensory things that take you to different places you've seen over the years, or you traveled over the years, or is that like the key one?
That
was a really weird question. So if that didn't make sense.
No, it's not. It's not. There's like that one was an olfactory smell. That was one. There's visual things that definitely take you back. I get in different areas and they remind me of like Peru, and like the slums in Peru. And there's different things, but I'd have to do an analyze that one a little bit more too.
I think one of the great things about the book is you took your time to also explain that you had some, I don't want to say touristy moments, but you got to experience some of the sights. You got to see some of the things that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity perhaps to be there. So you needed to get some of that culture as well. With some of the more, again, to use lack of a better word, but some of the more touristy things that you did, what were some of the key things that you were able to see?
That was really poignant to a couple of the groups that we went with. Most of them, like between like Operation Smile, International Health Emissaries, and even like going with Cindy McCain, part of the process of going off with those organizations is they want you to see what is out there. They don't just want to take you into you're not flying into a hospital, staying in that hospital, working, and then going back out. They want you to experience, life outside of that. And like every place we went, there was something else to see, obviously Cambodia, we went to see, we did what we did. And when we went to see Angkor Wat and all the temples, in places in like Guatemala, we went to like Tikal to see the temples there. Peru, Machu Picchu. Yeah. Everywhere we went, there was some type of thing that they were like, they wanted. And I think that's the way with a lot of organizations that use volunteers. They will take you to a certain spot and you will do all you can to help that organization. But that organization then wants you to see the world around them. why you're there, what else exists.
I
And
loved that. I think it was those organizations encouraging that piece of it. Like, all work and no play. Like, you want to be able
yeah,
to enjoy some of the time you're there and take home some of that experience. And I really admired that was a piece of the travel.
and like everyone that we've been with has done that. Every international organization that John and I travel with, they made time after like international health emissaries. We would go out, we would do 5, 7, 8 days in like the slums doing, dental work, health work. And then after that, we would travel out to some, beautiful area where there was either like a volcano or the Galapagos Islands or the Amazon jungle. And they wanted you to see, that there was a different world outside of what you normally lived in.
So I have a question that I want to ask, and it's a heavier one. So we're going to get to that.
Go for
Before
it.
I do, I am going to say, for all those watching, there is a giveaway that we're going to be doing during this. And if you can hold it through this question and get a little bit of a bummer feeling, then we're going to reward you with something good. So we'll ask this and we'll do a giveaway. It's basically what I'm getting at. There was a lot in this book that was heavy in the best ways. You wrote it out in a way that was, you felt like you were there. You were experiencing it alongside you. And
Thank you.
as difficult as it was to read those things and experience those things, it was real. One of the things that you wrote was, I was very nervous going into filming my first facial surgery because of the simple fact these were children. This was, in my opinion, one of the most difficult parts of the book to really comprehend, because these were children and you had people lining up to get services and get help. Tell us a little bit about that experience, about those kids, and about being there and living that moment.
All right. Well, the first trip that John and I did, like to take a quick step back, when we were in Cambodia with the landmine organization, we ran into Cindy McCain. Cindy McCain was, Senator John McCain's wife. We just all hit it off, and we didn't even know she was going to be there or any of that stuff. So we ran into her. We all hit it off. After we left, her assistant contacted me and was like, "Hey, Cindy wants to know if you guys want to go and help her on some other groups to film some stuff." We're like, "Sure." So the first time we got the call, I think I was working on a show called, I was actually in Wilmington, North Carolina, working on a movie, and I was in a hotel room and I got a call. It was Cindy's assistant. And she said, "Hey, Cindy wants you to go with her to film an Operation Smile mission." And she's like, "Have you ever been on one? Do you know what it's like?" And I'm like, "Well, I know what they're about, but I don't know what the whole mission is." And she goes, "Okay, so we're going to send you in on like day one, and you're going to see all the way through. And then Cindy and I are going to come in right before surgery days. And then we'll follow it like out to the end." And that was the first time that we actually went, on somebody else's dime, but also somebody else's suggestion to see, something we'd never experienced. And, I knew what, Operation Smile did, but I didn't really understand the whole process of it. So we were just like thrown into the very beginning of a mission to see how, these thousands of families and people come in to try to get, get accepted for a surgery. And then you see who's chosen for the surgery. And then they go to surgery days, and you have a bunch of, doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists from around the world that all go in to, to help. And so it was a trip. I mean, John and I both, we we put on scrubs, we sanitize to what the specific sanitization for that that area was, and next thing you know, you're walking into a room and there are children of all different ages, and they're on these operating tables, and this isn't like what you would imagine in the United States. So in the first one we saw in Vietnam, we walked in, the back window is like a louvered window. There's flies buzzing in and out. There's nothing of like any like sanitary conditions. But as we learned later on, facial surgeries can be done in environments that open body surgeries can't be done in. You could do a children like a facial surgery in like an outdoor environment with no sanitary stuff whatsoever, and the face heals faster than other open organs. It's a really weird thing once you actually realize what it is. I just went to skinny popcorn in the back. So sorry. Wait a minute. There we go.
There you go.
So yeah, we learned as we went along. But when you walk into an operating room for your first time, and it's not like a U.S. operating room, you've got 3 to 4 operating beds in a room, and each one of them has a surgery going on at the same time, with doctors from around the world. It's not heartbreaking. It's just, I don't know. It's amazing to watch. I mean, these people are changing lives of children, families, villages, just by doing a surgery. And I think that with OpSmile, I think it's like $240, $250 is the cost of what it is to get one children's facial surgery. And yeah, we jumped into it, but yeah, it was, God, it was amazing.
And that was in Asia and Guwahati, right? Were the 2 Operation Smile?
Oh, well, I mean, I kind of wrote down like a little list, like
Perfect.
when you and I have been talking, but what outside of the book, like after the last, like Guwahati, India, was the other one I wrote about. I think Kenya was one I wrote about with Operation Smile. And then I believe the Vietnam one was Operation Smile. I think there was another one with Cindy. We also did a Vietnam one. But I wrote down some notes just so people know, like after the last chapter of the book, there was also Ecuador, Brazil, Haiti. We did twice with a human trafficking organization.
Oh, wow.
Bolivia was another Operation Smile. Panama, Operation Smile. Paraguay, Bogota, Colombia, Guwahati, Mexico. So yeah, it just kept going. So I mean, actually, after the book, there was still another like 15 countries that John and I continued on to do what we were doing.
And I wondered about that. That was something I wanted to ask, was if you continued, because I felt like there had to be
to stop somewhere.
Oh yeah, right. Will there be a second book?
With people like you continuing to comment and push things, I have 2 other books that are like in the process that I've been working on. I started another one that starts with John and I in Brazil at an Operation Smile mission, and that one continues out through a bunch of different countries. But what that one also is more of it's not just a story of like location to location. The second one kind of encompasses the lessons that we learned. A little bit more than like the first one. The first one is, it's very, there are lessons we learned in the first one, but after you get done writing one book and you continue doing stuff, you kind of like develop a secondary lesson plan. And so there's a second one. And then I also started kind of like working on my first like fiction, but the fiction is on what I have done and what John have done. But if you can imagine, kind of like a Clive Cussler novel on a more humanitarian scale. So I've got 2 of them that I'm working on right now. So yeah, hopefully.
That's amazing. I'm very happy to hear that. Like I said, the way you wrote this book, and if anybody in here is like, I don't like to read, it's hard, or I don't have time. This book it flows. That's the best way I can put it. It has a good flow
Thank
to
you.
it. Now, when I read it, I really wanted to take my time with it, but if I wanted to breeze through it, I could have, because of the way it flows. That was something you don't find with a lot of books these days. But Kevin, you did a great job with getting it to be a good flow. I took my time with it because I wanted to be able to talk to you about it. I wanted to get as much information as I can. We've scratched the surface. There is so much more that we haven't talked about yet. Let's do the giveaway, and then we will talk some more and go from there. So
Perfect.
The giveaway, it's nothing crazy. I didn't want to make people do anything insane. You don't got to send us like weird pictures of playing in the snow or anything. Papa Goss, yes, you've got to order this book. So I'm going to put it's a trivia question, and the first person that we get an answer from on our side in the comments, that's the winner. It's the only way I can do it. I might be able to find timestamps, but I give you my word. Oh yeah, there's timestamps on here. The first person who submits their answer and we see it on our side, that is the winner. All right. So here we go. I'm going to click the button to make it show in 3, 2, 1. How often does the creeper return and how long does he stay? I could have said, name all the locations where Kevin volunteered with Operation Smile. I went.
Wow. How often does creeper return? Oh, okay. Never mind. You're going for okay. I'm like trying to figure out like which trailer park. Okay, I got you. All right, I got you. You went for the easy one. Okay.
Yeah. I have a problem with either going too easy. Spooky Hollows, congratulations, sir. That was the first answer that we saw. Let me show you what you're going to be winning here. I did mean to show that as well.
Yep.
Boom.
Oh, you guys went with that one. That's cool.
Yep, that is the prize, dual signed. So that will be shipping to you courtesy of CSR Collectibles. Thank you, CSR, so much for this. I really appreciate it. Spooky, we will send me a message on the Facebook page, and we'll Kurgle Ironclad, the creeper is always there. Awesome. So thank you. Thank you guys so much for taking part in that and joining in for the giveaway. I appreciate all of you. I see some awesome answers coming in. All correct answers too. But like I said, either I make the question way too hard or way too easy. I can never find a middle ground here. So, all right.
I might have actually got the date wrong myself, but that's perfect.
So when we look at your experiences, we look at where you traveled: Cambodia, Freedom Fields; Vietnam, Operation Smile; Kenya, World Journey of Smiles; Kosovo, Halo Trust; Peru, International Health Emissaries; Asia Tour with McCain, Operation Smile, World Food Program; Guatemala, Dubai, International Health Emissaries; Gujarati, Operation Smile. Those are the ones that I have in here. That's more for just everybody listening. Kevin knows this. He's like, yeah, Josh, I was there. Some of the things that really stood out to me and some of the adventures that you were on, you shoved the vice president of Kosovo. Tell us about that. Like, not everybody can say they shoved a foreign diplomat.
That was amazing. That was an amazing day. So one of the reasons that Cindy would take John and I around is because she just knew that we were these two stunt guys. We had big hearts, and she loved being around us. So we were in Kosovo. We flew in like 10 days after they got their independence as a sovereign country. This is after the whole Milosevic trying to commit genocide. You know, it's research it. You know, what I try doing in the book is pushing just enough information that people might go, oh, I want to look more into this, because you know you can't put all the information in a book or it would be 4,000 pages long. So like cliff notes on that one. John and I woke up in the morning and we went down to the little breakfast nook. We were with Cindy. We had two of our security guys were from the British SAS. We just knew them as Tony and Bob. We don't
And they
really know
sounded
what
like very interesting characters.
they were
Like, very
amazing. We have
intimidating.
no idea what their real names were, but that was Tony and Bob. And we walked down and they're like, are you guys ready to go? And John and I are like, okay, what? And they're like, you going to shave? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, gentlemen, you're going to meet a president of a country. And I'm like, okay, sure. So we go back up, rip the facial hair off. We dress with what we can. And next thing you know, we're in a car, we're driving around. And that one was one of those that just brings back so many memories too. So we enter this building at the bottom of the stairs. We walk up the stairs, and I guess it was a diplomatic area. We get to the top of the stairs. We're with Cindy. We're with her assistant. We're with the people that are with us, our security. We get to the top, and if you looked at John and I looked at the left, and there's an entire what you see in the U.S. when you see like the president comes out and the media is there on the other side of the rope and they're just like all shooting photos and stuff. Well, that was on the other side of where we were. So John and I were with the presidential side, and the other side of the rope had all the local photographers and media from Kosovo. So we're like, okay, cool. We're cool people. So we get in, we go into the room. We get introduced to, Cindy's like, okay, this is the president. We get president of Kosovo, vice president of Kosovo, which we didn't even know who any of these other people was. We knew the guy at the head of the table. It wasn't even a table. We were like at a fireplace setting. Basically, there were two couches, a little room in the middle, like a little area in the middle. Behind them was like a wall with some photographs on it. And Cindy was on the right side. The president was on the left side. They started talking about, and what we were discussing at that time, or what we were filming, was the removal of not just landmines, but cluster bombs in Kosovo. Mm-hmm. And I can speak for 4 hours on that one, but we won't get there yet. So we're in the room, and Cindy's assistant is sitting back next to the door on one side. There's, they're all chatting. And John and I we found a comfy spot in front, and he's shooting photos, I'm doing video. And they decided to let the entire press corps in. So the press corps comes in, and they are like, this is like, maybe 30 or 40 people with cameras. They're all crowding around us. They're pushing us. John and I aren't press corps. We don't know what this is. We're stunt guys with cameras. So we're sitting there, and we just get slammed with all these people pushing forward. And they're getting their photos for the news. And then somebody snaps their fingers and says something, and all these people start leaving. And John and I are just like, all right, fine. Good. Bye. Good riddance. So we keep sitting there, and we keep filming. And then all of a sudden, some guy starts pushing me on the shoulder. And I just kind of shrug my shoulder, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then he pushes me even more, and I'm like, okay, I didn't know who he was. And he gives me another push, and I just pushed him back into a couch, and I'm like, stay. And he's looking at them like, what the hell is going on? And Cindy's laughing, and the president's people kind of understand, and they kind of do a little giggle. And then Cindy goes, they're with me. And it's like, okay, cool. So then John and I just sit there, and we filmed the entire thing, and it was great. It was her, the president of Kosovo at the time, talking about, what's happening with them in the United States, and how the U.S. is helping get rid of the landmines and munitions that are coming into the country that NATO dropped. And it was just, really cool thing. About, I don't know, half an hour later, we all leave. We walk down the stairs. We're walking across the parking lot. And, I looked over at Cindy, and I was like, I think that went pretty well. And she started laughing. She goes, it went really well. She goes, my favorite part is when you push the vice president of Kosovo over a couch. And I was like, I did what? And she goes, the guy that was tapping you on the shoulder was the vice president of Kosovo. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's just like, God, don't change. And I'm like, I didn't, you should have told me. She's like, if I would have told you, it wouldn't have been that fun. I'm like, oh my God. There's
I
not,
gotta
I mean,
say, Cindy sounds like a great person. Like the experiences and how you talk about her and her like looking out for you, her team looking out for you, sounds fantastic.
She's a badass.
Were
She's my mentor. I love her. I could never say anything negative about it. And the hardest part about my life right now is when people go, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, I'm trying to be Cindy McCain, and it's tough, but that's my goal.
And I promised everyone watching we won't go too far down this path, but I am curious to know, were you a political person, or were you aware politically or involved in any kind of political matters before you got into this, before you met Cindy?
I'm ashamed to say it, but I never even voted before I met Cindy.
And that's changed now, I take it, the way you answered?
You
don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer
that.
No,
it has.
I realize it's a dangerous question.
No, it's changed because I realized that I do appreciate a political view on things. And I didn't change for Cindy or any of that stuff. But I was just one of those people, early on, I was just like, whatever, I can't make a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I still believe I necessarily can't make a difference, but I have the voice now, and I'm like, okay, I'm just at least going to express my voice.
Politics is a very scary subject. Like I said, I don't want to go too far into that realm, but I was curious about that. If beforehand, like you really knew who Cindy was, or
I voted. Okay, one chapter that got left out of the book that was originally in the book. John and I got invited by when John McCain was running against Barack Obama for the presidency. Cindy invited John and I out to Arizona on election night. It got pulled out of the book, but there was an entire chapter about John and I. We actually went out. We were guests of Cindy and John McCain when on election night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we were in Arizona with the family when that whole thing happened.
That had to have been a very interesting experience.
That was really interesting. I learned a lot of stuff during and after that I never knew before. But yeah, no, we were there. We spent the evening with them. I still have this press pass in the back. That's like, we could get past Secret Service. We were with the family in their room, drinking bottles of wine. And no, it was a really interesting evening. I don't know a lot of people that have been invited by
That's
of the guy running for president. And the thing was, she kept telling us that, if John wins, if John McCain wins, that you and John, your business cards are going to read video something of the wife of the president of the United States. She's like, you guys are going to be my video people if he wins.
Oh, wow.
You might have to move to DC. I'm like, okay.
Another door opening.
Oh yeah. And they were like, do you want to meet Sarah? Like when everything happened and they were like, do you want to go up and meet Sarah Palin? She's right here. And we were like, okay. We were like maybe the 2% in that entire evening that had access to the woman that was running for vice president and the man that was running for president.
That's so crazy. So we're a little over an hour, so we'll try to wrap it up here soon. There might be a
we're a little over an hour and we haven't hit anything that we planned on talking.
I know. I'm terrible.
No. This is going to be a 2 or 3 parter. I'm okay with that. Perfect.
Yeah, I think so. One of the other quotes that I pulled out of the book that I think is going to be my new life motto: playing dumb can get you out of a mess of shit. When did you find that playing dumb could really benefit you?
I really hope John's listening on this one because he's gonna. So, I grew up in like the theme park world here, and I see what tourists do, and sometimes just being that dumb tourist and not trying to be pompous about it can get you out of, a situation. The one you're talking about in particular is, we had just come back off a 10-day campaign with Cindy in Southeast Asia. We were leaving Cambodia and in Phnom Penh, which is the capital, and John and I got to that airport, and we were just these two cocky stuntmen because we were traveling around with Secret Service, and all we had to do was just nothing. And so we got to the airport, and the girl behind the little counter in a window outside was just like, "There's a problem, something," and I'm like, "You know what? Whatever, deal with it. We're gonna go home." So the gist of the story was that during that same time period is when the Olympics was going into to China. And so John and I basically left Cambodia, and we thought we were flying into okay, jog my memory, where was the Olympics in China? It was Beijing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we thought we were flying into Beijing. So what happened during the Olympics in Beijing is the old international airport in Beijing became the local airport, and they built this giant new one so that all the athletes could fly into that one. So John and I basically, we hopped on a plane, we flew in, we thought we were flying into Beijing, into the international. We accidentally flew into the domestic terminal in Beijing. So when we hopped off the plane, we had no permission to be in China. We had our passports weren't stamped. There was nothing. We couldn't even prove why we were there. So we ended up being shuttled into a little immigration room. In China, when you're in the airport in communist China, everybody is military. So we're sitting in a room, and the first thing I did was I called Cindy. And I said, without visas, yes, thank you, John. So I sent a message to Cindy, and I'm like, okay, I text her. I'm like, this is what's going on. And the first thing she said, and God, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble, but she goes, "Were you strip searched by a bunch of Chinese midgets?" And I'm like, no. And I'm like, okay, so I'm like, this is serious. And she's like, okay. She's like, do I need to send a Secret Service? And I went, I don't think you need to send a Secret Service. I'm going to try to talk my way out of this. And so she's like, look, here's a number. Call me before they take your phone, and I'll get somebody there because I have people in that country. I'm like, okay. So John and I were in this room, and each time somebody walked in, it was like they had more military emblems on their chest. And they would walk in and they would say something. And I looked at him and I just kept saying, Beijing. And they're like, no Beijing. And I'm like, Beijing. And like, no Beijing. Somebody else would come in. And about 5 people later, this kid comes in and he's like, I know what you're doing. I'm like, do you? And it's like, yeah. He's like, you're supposed to be on the plane, blah, 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 blah. This is what happened. And I just was like, look, I grew up in a world of Universal and Disney, and tourists can be stupid, and sometimes it just works. And that was one of those where I was like, I'm going to play dumb tourist. And John, he looked at me at one point. He's like, dude, this is how people disappear. And I'm like, let's see what happens. So I just kept saying Beijing until finally some kid came in, and then he knew what was going on. We came out. They took us over to immigration. They stamped the passports for a day visa into China, which again, John and I didn't know what that meant. We went through security. Security wanted to hold us again because we had a lot of cameras, and the kids like, we got to run. So we ran out of Beijing or whatever airport we were in. And this is like the heart of communist China. It's in Guizhou. We ran out of the airport. We hit the plane. We flew. We landed in, because we were flying out of a Chinese domestic area. We didn't fly into the international airport in Beijing. We flew into the local airport in Beijing. So when we landed, John and I came off the plane and we're walking down a runway with like barbed wire fence on one side and there's planes flying next to us or landing. And we get into the area where there is like nothing is in English. We finally went to lost luggage. We found a bunch of young kids that wanted to speak English. We got our luggage and they're like, okay, here, you need to go on the number 5 to get to the new airport. So we got in and we hopped on this taxi or like bus, and it was basically like the number 5 bus in downtown Beijing. So without any visas, permits, or anything, John and I ended up in the heart of Beijing, just driving around, making it to the other airport to finally find our flight out. Yeah, we got lucky, but stupid sometimes works really good.
But with your luggage too, like that's the part that kind of amazed me was like, there. I think there was one, maybe Kenya or Peru, that John's luggage got lost.
Vietnam, the very first trip to Vietnam, John's luggage got lost. Yeah,
and you haven't had issues losing luggage.
No, that the first time that he got lost, his luggage somehow went to Houston, Texas, instead of Vietnam.
It's so crazy, so crazy. I've always been afraid, and I guess I was kind of expecting that more in your book of lost luggage, lost camera equipment, things like that. So to hear that there wasn't, like you had very good luck with those kind of experiences was huge.
What we did when we traveled was we made sure that we took all of our camera gear in like a carry-on with us. And we had like a little backpack with a couple changes of clothes. And the whole purpose was if all of our clothes gets lost, if everything gets lost, we have our camera gear. That was the main thing. We needed to have our videotapes. And again, when we started out, we had like the little mini DV tapes that goes into cameras. There was nothing digital. So we had to have our tapes. We had to have our cameras. And if we spent like 10, 12 days in the same clothes, whatever, it didn't matter.
That's John says 2 weeks, one set of clothes. I would be losing my mind.
Dude, we came off the plane one time from India into Chicago, and John and I were both in shorts, and it was like 7 degrees and snow flurries coming, and we had to walk from the plane to get to the gate. And we were the only 2 people standing there in the shorts because we came from India.
That's so crazy. When you were talking about Kosovo, you mentioned the cluster bombs. And one thing that I think is interesting to point out is the colors of the cluster bombs you said were similar to that of aid packages that were dropped.
Yes.
It seems like somewhere along the line there would be somebody that'd be like, hey, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that. War or not. I mean, that's a very like childish outlook because it is.
No, it's a communication level between organizations. So one organization might do an aid drop and there are white packets that drop to the ground, plastic packets, and they want it to hit the ground. They want it to be able to stay without having, any type of environmental things affect it, water, air, whatever. So one plane might drop that out. But I don't think they really analyze when they're doing cluster munitions because some of them look like toys. Some of them look like food packets.
Right.
And I mean, if Sydney was on this with us right now, she would be the biggest, she would back everything I was saying. It's as soon as people start dropping cluster bombs, game over. You never know what's going on. I mean, that was a big thing in Kosovo that we went to landmines, that's one thing. But when you get the UN involved and they start dropping cluster munitions, and I described this in the book, but if you imagine like a cluster bomb, as they would call it, having maybe 100 to 200 smaller bomblets that are maybe the size of like a can of coffee inside. And one plane will drop 30, 40, 50 of those. And there will be maybe 30 or 40 flights a day that drop those. If you do the math, there are hundreds of these cluster munitions that are dropping in the ground. And if you're a soldier, it's like your worst enemy and your best friend. These things are designed to destroy facilities. So if an invading force comes in, they want the area in front of them taken out, they'll throw these cluster munitions out. But the weird part is there's like a 30% built-in failure rate on them. They have to be dropped at a certain time, a certain level. I mean, I'm guessing there's temperatures, there's everything else in effect. So, if 1,000 of them are dropped, 300-400 of them hit the ground, they don't erupt. But all it takes is somebody hitting it with a shovel to, blow it up. Where a landmine, you might lose an ankle. You hit a cluster bomb, you're losing yourself, the cow next to you, and 5 other people standing around.
It's war to me is such an insane concept. Like, we've seen movies, we see documentaries even that go into Vietnam and things like that, but it's still something that is so hard for me to comprehend, to take actions to physically harm others and innocents who can be in the way. Being in these countries that were really ravaged by war and have the remnants left behind is mind-blowing to me. Like, the fact that there's still minefields out there, the fact that there are still cluster bombs and things like that out there, these organizations have their hands full trying to get them cleaned up. Do you see Halo Trust or any of these organizations ever hitting a point where they're like, we're done, we did it all, we're finished, there's no more left?
No, they're still in Cambodia. Halo is in Cambodia, working the same fields that John and I saw. They're in Mozambique, they're in Angola, they're in Bolivia Colombia, working in the areas down there that the FARC and other organizations were creating, drug environments and stuff. We have now hit, each time we hit another level of a war scenario. I posted a few things on the Heart of a Stuntman website. I have a blog on there, and one of them is what's in the future for the children in the Ukraine or people in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And the Ukraine right now is going to be another Kosovo. If you look at Kosovo, if you research that, if you then go or back farther, you research Cambodia, the Ukraine is going to be that. So if we took every single thing in the Ukraine right now that was out of the war, we went, okay, war's over, game over, this is it. Everybody go home. Fine, everybody goes home. What people don't realize is the hundreds of thousands, and I'm not joking when I say hundreds of thousands of landmines, anti-tank mines, everything that's been put into the ground.
Right.
And this isn't just the bad guys. This is like the United Nations. NATO gets in. NATO does an airstrike. They're trying to do what they need to do, and it's good and it's bad at the same time.
Right.
But they're right now, Ukraine for the next 20, 30 years is going to be a next Cambodia. There, if all the war was out, there's still, hundreds of thousands of landmine, munitions that are in the ground. And now we've hit, that was one level. So then we hit that, and now we've gone into, the other side of the world, and you've got Gaza and that whole thing. So, we keep each time we hit a war zone, it's not what you see on the news, it's what's left over, which is the really hard thing to see.
It's so crazy. So crazy. And that is a really good point with Ukraine and how their future is going to be that cleanup. Like, that's something that I don't think a lot of people really think about. I didn't think about it until you just said it now. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but.
Oh yeah. One of my really good friends that was with the first group that we went out with in Cambodia, another friend of mine and I have been working with her, and she's out of Poland, and there's a couple of organizations in Poland that are pulling the orphans from the Ukraine into Poland. So we're trying to keep up with them to see what we can do to help.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's another, that's going to be there for years. And I mean, that alone was bad enough, but then you hit, Gaza and Israel and everything else. And I mean, yeah, it's not easy, but one of the biggest and the key point that I want everybody to take away, anybody that reads the book, and I mean, you might have read this in the back, and I know we're running out of time, but my biggest takeaway from everything I've done and all I ever want to push is that humanity is not helping the world. Humanity is one person helping another person in need. It's a handout. That's it. The only thing that's going to save the world is one person helping somebody else. I mean, I don't care if it's a guy at the grocery store that needs $1. I don't care if it's taking a shopping cart from point A to point B because nobody else is going to run their car into it. It is like, we as humans have to realize that humanity is within our hearts. And the only thing that is going to help, the future is just, I mean, fucking don't worry about yourself and just try to help somebody. It doesn't have to be huge, but it's like, if you push towards helping another person, that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that difficult. It really isn't. And we found this out, like, when we were working with the, SIGSCOM and in the groups, it's like somebody comes up to you, has a question. You answer the question, you talk to them, you shake their hand, you stand up, you give them a hug. This is, this is love. This is life. And it's the same way with everything else in the world. It's just, if everybody would just help one other person, we would be in a different world. I mean, that's.
Josh in the comments agreed with you, said absolutely, impacting the people around us impacts the world around us.
Thank you. I mean, I learned it through a really weird level too. I mean, I was empathetic as I was a child, but I realized that, I mean, empathy is an internal thing, but then being passionate towards helping somebody else is like the external help of empathy. And it's not hard. It's not hard to help, help thy neighbor. Okay, fine. Yeah. We've all heard that, but you don't do it looking for anything back. You just do it because it's right. And I've seen it in multiple, I've seen it in tens of countries, I can't use hundreds of countries around the world, but yeah, it's just, you just help, you just give back. You're not going to lose anything by it,
Right. And we have another comment. William Gaunt.
Willie and I went to elementary school and junior high together.
Okay, cool. William, I'm very sorry. Sometimes when we go live, we have random comments that get thrown out there, and I never know if I'm stepping into something that is.
I just noticed it.
Yeah, so I wanted to pull this one forward, but I wanted to say the name first to make sure that I wasn't stepping into.
Just so you're pushing a straight score. Okay, so my birthday was on December 16th. My wife and I went out. We had a good time, and we were heading back to the house about 12:30, and there was. She looked over and she's like, "Yeah, there's a." We're about 2 miles from the house. She's like, "Yeah, that looks like a guy having trouble in the middle of the street. I'm like, okay. We pulled up behind him, and I jumped out. This was the day in Orlando when it was like, 30, 40 mile an hour winds. We were hitting super rain. I jumped out, and he was like, yeah, hey, I ran out of gas. And if you were to put him and I on a spectrum of a color scale, we would be polar opposite. I'll say that. And I was like, okay, get in the car. So I spent the next like half hour pushing him down about 1.5 miles to a gas station. When I got him in there, I went inside. I was like, all right, I paid $10 for gas to get him to where he was going. And my wife filmed it. And she just put this thing up, like, yeah, this is my husband. This is Kevin. This is his birthday. And this is what he's doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was like, I didn't do it for the purpose of anybody seeing it. But it was like, again, this is like, it happens,
Yeah.
2,000 cars drive past somebody, and why can't somebody be the one person just to pull over and go, hey,
I think the greatest thing that happened this entire conversation is William making that comment at that time, because that is such a perfect way of showing practice what you preach, and like proving to the world that you are living that message, you are putting that out there, and that's perfect. And not that I would have doubted that for a second after meeting
you. Would have done it too. I know you. You would have jumped out and helped somebody.
I absolutely would have. I feel like any opportunity I have where I could have helped somebody, I can think back and nothing comes to mind of where I should have. There was one time where I did try to stop and help somebody. It had been snowing, their car went off the road, and they were terrified at this bearded guy coming up to try to help them. So they didn't get my help, but there have been good times, or have been times where, yeah, I have helped. And even with the kids, like one of the things when we were in Colorado for our wedding, when we were at different parks and things, it was always, leave it nicer than you found it. Like if there's trash, just pick it up, throw it away. Just do little things like that here and there. Leave it nicer than you found it. And that's always been like a big thing for me and my family is stuff like that.
That's kind of what like the second, if I should say there's a second book, because when my father passed away, I started writing a book on him, but then I've been working on another book on kind of like ideals. And one of the things basically is that, and I called it shopping cart religion. And I mentioned it to a bunch of people, and they're like, well, what? So shopping cart, you pick different bits and pieces from religions, you put it into a shopping cart, and you take it. I'm like, no. This is like not that deep. I'm like, you go to a grocery store and you pull into a parking lot, and there's a shopping cart next to you. So you have two choices. You leave it sitting there, or you go, okay, I'm going to grab it and take it up front. Now, if you grab it and you take it up front and put it where it's supposed to be, then that alleviates somebody else running into it. That alleviates somebody trying to find a parking place. And that alleviates the fact that the person that is even actually paid to come out there and do that has to work extra hard. So I kind of look at that and I'm like, well, can we push that into everyday life and just call it shopping cart religion? And this is one of like the areas that I'm working on in like the secondary book. But it's like, so if everybody can just kind of take something and put it where it belongs, how hard is that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're walking on a trail, running, biking, you stop, you see something around, okay, garbage can, throw it away, fine. But it can be easy, or it can be hard, or it can be elevated, or it can be simple. But that was just kind of one of those things I could put together. I'm like, how simple is it to go, okay, why don't we all just put things back where they belong? It's not that difficult. And, and you don't look at it and you go, oh, well, it's not my job. I'm like, I don't care if it's your job or not. Just do it. And it makes everybody else's job easier. So just put things. So that was like, so there's a lot of stuff in the second book that I'm working on. There's like looking at life like a child. There's a lot of cool stuff. And, events like this helped me realize that maybe I should continue to push part 2.
As you should. You definitely should. That's so. And again, I do want to point out in the description of this video, if you're watching on YouTube, there is a link to the website, harveststuntman.com. Really easy. Go there, check out the book. There's links on where you can find it. If you want to meet Kevin, if you see one of your local horror community cons is happening, or one of the bigger cons is happening, whatever, start dropping comments in their posts saying that you want Kevin there. Tag SigsCom Marketing. Let them know as well. Kevin, thank you so much for your time tonight. I definitely think that we're going to have a part 2 because, like you said, we didn't touch everything that I had.
We didn't touch half what you sent me. We made it through like a 18th of what we were going to talk about. But no, dude, anybody wants to talk to me, I am so easy to find. And I'm a stunt guy that just happens to travel around and help people. So, dude, anybody wants to talk to me about any questions, anybody wants to learn how to get involved with organizations, dude, let me know. Just message me. I'm fine.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the night. I am going to play the little video that we made one last time as we close out for the folks who may be missing in the beginning. But thank you all so much. Do the whole like and subscribe thing. Find Kevin on social medias. He loves Instagram. Add him on there so you can.
Oh yeah, he loves it.
And he has a Facebook group as well, Harvest Stuntman. That way you can keep an eye on his blog and all of that going on as well. Kevin, is there any final thoughts or anything you want to share?
Dude, I want to do part 2. We barely scratched the surface of what you wanted to talk about. So, dude, let's go for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go for another.
Yeah, we will get more time out there. Keep an eye on the Facebook page. We'll get it out there. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope you have a great holiday.
Happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Cambodia is one of the most heavily mined locations on the planet. Clean water wells, medical facilities, and schools are often accessible only by a small footpath leading directly through a live landmine field. Deviation from these paths can lead to maiming or death. If not for advocates like Freedom Fields USA and the hands-on work of demining groups like the Halo Trust, the remains of war will continue to lie inches below the fertile soil, indiscriminately waiting to attack. A snowy runway in Kosovo, still pockmarked by war, accepted us onto its frozen tarmac. Littering the country, unexploded cluster bombs still threaten the citizens daily. The Halo Trust was in a desperate battle with the elements, and with international governing voices, declared this deadly refuge of war before another child's life was tragically cut short. With Cindy McCain at our side, we were on a mission to reveal these truths. The hidden village of Kekchi Indians, deep in the jungles of Guatemala and accessible only by a small boat, was desperate for dental care. International health emissaries invited us to help reach these people, spotlighting a frightening reality. When you can't eat due to decaying teeth, you suffer a slow death of malnutrition. The dentists of IHE saved them. Facial deformities and cleft palates afflict millions annually across the globe. But in rural areas of India, steeped in mythological lore, these abnormalities can be deemed a curse by the gods, bringing shame to a family and leaving children locked away for life. Operation Smile chose Guwahati, India, a place seldom visited by international medical teams, to be a hub for free facial surgeries, giving thousands of men, women, and children new lives and new smiles.